I will let you know.
Let's do a call, Olivia, when you started off, if there are any additions to the
We are
agenda.
live.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Pillar 3 Advisory Committee. I am Olivia Pearson, Supervisor of College Readiness for Prince George's County Public Schools and Committee Chair. And if all of us will just please briefly state your name, and I will start with the committee co-chair.
Okay, good afternoon. Dave Harper, Chesapeake College, Maryland's Eastern Shore. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kirkland Murray, Anne Arundel Workforce Development Corporation.
Robin Werner, Talbot County Public Schools, CTE Supervisor.
Peter Banya, student at Duke University and former Howard County Board of Education.
Okay, again, good afternoon. And so today we are together for an hour to discuss, of course, any updates from the AIB. And we're going to talk about success measures as it relates to career counseling and also CTE. With that, I'd like to just offer up some time if anyone wants to add or edit our agenda items for our time today. I'll give you a minute just to think about it and let us know if you want to add anything.
I will just add a note for constituent feedback. Okay, so each of us from the Workforce Investment Board, the community college, the student, Board of Ed, and CTE lead, we each have different constituents. And so if there's any feedback we want to provide from those groups to the processes and the discussions ongoing, I think we'll open that window.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's an excellent point. And I think we can talk about it, and also we can infuse it as we start to discuss some of our success measures. I think we can also integrate it into the dialogue as well. Okay, anything else? All right, great. So let's jump right in. Rachel, are you able to provide updates as it relates to the AIB?
Absolutely, I would love to. And I'm going to work to be really, really quick. So I'll give you what I got. And then if you have any questions for me, feel free to let me know. The first update is that you may have seen that the governor has appointed the new board member for the vacant seat on the AIB. And that is Justin Robinson, a teacher in Prince George's County. I'm excited. He and I both are nationally board certified in the very same field, and you don't find too many people that are early adolescent mathematics nationally board certified. But there is a press release. I'm going to share it with you here, and we did put it out on Twitter for anybody watching. If you want to find that, we will make that available also on our website. He's not yet sworn in, so that will be the official process that will trigger, him actually being at a board meeting and being there. But we're super excited to welcome him to the board. A real quick update. I believe at their last meeting had shared that we had received all 24 of the local blueprint implementation plans, as well as the 4 state agency implementation plans. We and MSDE have been going through review processes, and MSDE has shared their feedback with the LEAs, and the AIB will also be sharing feedback. That feedback will trigger revisions, and with the goal of getting all plans approved in July, hopefully. I also wanted to give an update about the career counseling MOUs and plans. They had to be submitted with the LEA's submission in March, but the MOU has to be signed and in effect by July for the coming school year. So its review process is a little bit secondary to the review of the plans, because what was submitted in March was clearly not done. They were draft MOUs, they were early thinking. So we are in the process. We did get updated submissions in the middle of April from all of the LEAs. We will be reviewing those, and that will be the AIB and CTE committee or CTE staff will be reviewing those and providing feedback collectively to basically the signers of the MOUs. So the LEA and the local workforce board or community college, or whoever is signing that MOU. We aim to have it out around middle of May so that people have time. We recognize that there's a process involved in revisions. And then also around this, it's a legal document, which will require reviews from lawyers. But our goal is still to get the career counseling MOUs signed so that the programs are, solid and ready to begin in the fall. The final piece I wanted to mention was that our AIB members and staff would greatly appreciate any feedback that our advisory committee members have if you are reviewing plans, or if your committee would want to organize a structured review of the plans. There's nothing that we're like, here's the form you have to fill out, or a Google form, or anything specific. But as you're reading plans, if there's things that you think we should be aware of, or things that you want to point out, question, celebrate, raise a concern, whatever, we would absolutely appreciate that. One note, we do ask that if you are employed by a local school system, that you would read different school system plans, just to avoid that awkward moment. You don't need to be reading your employer's stuff and critiquing it. So if you do divide them up, maybe skip yours. If you want a list to do a sign up, I've done that for 2 of the other groups, and I can just make a copy of that if you want to do a sign up, or totally up to your committee how you want to go about that. Those are the 3 biggest things. There's always plenty happening at the AIB. We've got the outcome measures work group still underway, still with the goal of providing an update to the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan in August. Lots of other things, but is there anything in particular that I didn't share that you're curious about? That was my wait time and extended wait time. So I think that we are going to pass it to the next topic item. But if you do have questions, please feel free to email me, and let me know if you need anything in the review process. I can get you links or anything to the other documents.
So I have a question. And not that any of us need any additional work. I know I don't. But for this committee, I'm wondering if it would be helpful if we did read at least the career counseling plans of all the school systems. I think it would maybe give us a little bit better understanding of what they're planning.
Kirk, it would be a necessary effort almost before we provide substantive feedback.
Yeah.
Or at least it would inform our feedback.
Yeah.
I agree, but I know on behalf of PGCPS, we just made some huge shifts in our plan last week. And so even with that, I think it would be great for us to do that, but also understanding that there are a lot of, well, at least in some districts, there may be still some moving parts.
Olivia, I appreciate you mentioning that. I might be able to help with that on both parts. So Kirk, I could likely provide you all with just a condensed version of just the MOUs and just the response to the question 117 in the template. So you don't have to go navigating through all 24 documents and MOUs too. So I can get you the information in an easier way. And perhaps we could put out a call to everybody for, if they would like to update, if they've had significant updates, we have a folder where the LEAs can just post their newest MOU so that we can either review what they've given us, or if they have made substantial changes, we could ask for that, because obviously they're going to want feedback on the newest thinking. So I'll work on that and get you some information tomorrow and see what we can do. And I'll send the entire group some links to information.
Rachel, can I just ask something clarifying regarding the career counseling piece? I think, and I'm just speaking on behalf as an LEA and a CTE supervisor. I think where we got hung up a little bit was in figuring out like where this responsibility lies within an LEA, because originally in our blueprint plan and reading like all of the requirements for career counseling, I think there was more of the assumption that it is guiding students for, you know, one of the 3 post CCR pathways of dual enrollment, AP, CTE. But then it seems like there's been a little bit more of a shift of more LEAs housing that responsibility under CTE because of the CTE committee having some oversight and evaluation. And I know we had talked like on our team in Talbot of where does that lie? Like, is there going to be a heavier focus on CTE? I'm assuming there's still the expectation that they help in all 3 pathways, but I think it's because it was outlined in the implementation plan that I just want to make sure for all CTE supervisors and as well as my own LEA that we're on the right track of CTE having a lot of oversight with it. I hope that makes sense, but I just want to make sure that we're interpreting correctly of what we should be doing.
I think that does make sense, and it's a great question. I think when I think back to the February convening that we had, where we pulled together the LEAs, the community colleges, and all the local workforce boards, that document that came out towards the end of February, I think it was the 24th, was our best attempt of our initial thinking of, you know, what are we doing? We're creating this brand new thing. Who owns it? Who's responsible for what? And I think at that point, the guidance was mostly like, talk about it between the agencies and agree to what you want to agree to. So it may look different in Washington County than it does in Kent, than it does in Wacomico. Like it may look different in every single agreement. As things have gone deeper, as I keep talking about this as being the onion that we're peeling back the layers on, I think we're getting a lot more clarity on more of the things that need to be discussed or included. And so I think we're just in a natural progression of this is a brand new thing. It's not off the plates of the LEAs. It's definitely an agreement of all 3, but I do think we will see variance across the districts of how much and who, and just what it looks like. I'm hearing some pretty exciting conversations about what it's looking like in different areas. And I'm hearing similarly, like Olivia said, there's been really recent developments in the last couple of weeks where I'm hearing that folks are shifting beyond the logistics into the curriculum planning and into how does this look in a school day and in a student day and what teachers are involved. I would suggest that if there's any question and you need to pull us in, we did relaunch the question document that helped us shape the guidance document. I've gotten just about 10 questions, but if there's more that we can help give a definitive answer to, please use that tool. And then we do hope to be able to kind of share what we're seeing across all the plans when we do the next read of the career counseling plans and their MOUs, that we have that good look of what's happening across the state and can help spread or share ideas or address any places where folks are feeling stuck. Kirk, did I do justice with that answer from the local workforce board perspective?
You did.
Okay.
I had a meeting with the other 12 workforce development directors this morning. And some of them share where they were. We just didn't have time to go through everybody, but you know, people are at doing different things, all aligned to career counseling. We all have that model that it's career counseling. And Robin, we're all on that point that the role of the local workforce boards and career counseling is to prepare students for one of those 3 post CCR pathways. So I think we're all in agreement on that, but we're all in agreement on that point. You know, how we're going to do that. There may be some tweaks on that. And I'll give when we go through the constituent part, I'll give you a little bit more update of where all the local workforce boards are in the process. But definitely it's focusing. We see our role as getting students prepared for one of those 3 post-CCR pathways, with the understanding that not 100% of the kids are going to go in one of those. So we're going to have to continue to work with them to make sure that they're successful.
I'm
Okay,
glad
thank
to
you.
hear. Yes, I'm glad to hear. And I think, thank you, Robin, for bringing that up, because I think that was part of our dialogue in Prince George's is having the scope, of course, is larger than just the students who go through a CTE pathway, even though the Workforce Development Board is part of it. I think that is a shift in thinking for all of us. And I think that, again, as we're continuing to delve deeper into the legislation and start to roll out the different areas, you know, we have to kind of go back and see, you know, and level set as to what we're doing with it. Because one thing I'm trying to see how we can ensure, of course, that it follows the legislation and we're supporting the students through whichever path they choose and the ability to dabble in different ones. And also don't use this necessarily to push, like making sure we have students in this fulfilling this 45%, because it's a vehicle that we can try to work with students and see where we are and how many students are going to the 45% of students completing the CTE, but, you know, making sure that there's balance in the discussion. I hope I'm being clear. I know I said a lot.
No, you are. And I think what really started to make sense for me was we had a student recently who is interested in community college non-credit pathway of EMS after doing some CNA classes. And I think that's a perfect example because that's technically dual enrollment. They actually also did CTE, they did both. And now we're kind of coming up with like new scenarios that we didn't anticipate, because we traditionally think of dual enrollment as the communications class, the art history, those classes that have been lined up through our community college partners of moving students on the traditional AA degree. And now we're seeing all these different ways that the 3 pathways could be blended. You know, we have some AP courses that are also part of CTE. And I think that's the part where it makes sense to me that this counseling is not just CTE, because there can be a blend of those. And I think that's the whole intentionality with it. We had the CTE supervisors all met a few weeks ago, and we spent a lot of time on career counseling. And what I'm gathering from a lot of this is we had already been doing some of this in CTE because of our Perkins requirements. But what Blueprint is pushing is to expand that beyond CTE, which is great, and to be more intentional with what we're doing, putting more resources behind what we're already doing. So I think LEAs are kind of all over the place, because there are some that had been doing a lot of the same things year to year. And then there's others who had sought out after other grants before Blueprint. So we're all kind of like learning from each other of what everyone does already and expanding on something. So taking a step back and realizing like, here's what we do, here's where we can improve on that, and here's how we can be more inclusive of all 3 pathways, I think is like the overall like goal for everyone. But every county is going to get there differently. We had all discussed, kind of surveyed each other on who are you even posting for the job, like what are the requirements, who are you hiring? And it was interesting, the different LEAs taking different approaches of that, of teachers, school counselors, a combination. It could be either instructional assistants, like everyone kind of has a different approach with it. And we've been sharing like our job descriptions with one another. So I think that sometimes when we're working on something like this new, we kind of share things back and forth and it causes alarms when you're doing something different, but realizing that it might look very different for all of us, just like this 45. And I saw in the notes, that for rural, it could look different. That was another big piece. And I know I'm kind of like skipping onto something else, but I saw that on the notes. Another big like aha moment I could speak for myself at our directors meeting a few weeks ago was the discussion that the 45% is going to look different in different LEAs depending on what you have, your strengths, and then your areas that are a challenge. And that it might very well look like the rural areas might be pushed to find more industry credentials that align better. Still improving on our apprenticeship, but not keeping apprenticeship where it's at, still having goals to improve, but there might be more emphasis on industry credentials because those are more attainable for us. Where some of the other more urban areas that might have a little bit more, if they still have their challenges, certainly, that might be reversed, that they might already be doing well on offering some industry credentials, but might be given higher goals for apprenticeship. But not one is going to necessarily look the same for every LEA, and that we're all going to get kind of differentiated goals. And I think that hearing that was made sense to everybody and felt more of an attainable goal for every LEA. And you could kind of see the weight lifted. I mean, at least I felt off my shoulders of, okay, this makes sense because we're going to be given goals that we can meet, and there's going to be a timeline for it. It's not going to just be like next year you have to get here. And that was very clear in the implementation plan because they had taken all of our data from previous year of, if this were to go into place today off of these credentials, this is where your LEA would be, this is where you have to move. So seeing those examples on paper of where we're at now and how we move there, I think we've come a long way since our discussions like in the beginning of the year when we started this process of seeing where we need to be and that it is possible.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's talk about success measures because this is a lot of great background and I think we're moving in the right direction. But the legislation doesn't specify specific success measures. It's my understanding that was purposeful so that we can really, because it looks different in every LEA. So we can start to talk about what that looks like. And Kurt, I'd love to get your feedback because I feel like you started at our last meeting. I think you started to touch on some of the success measures you may envision. And so I would love to kind of start with your feedback as to, what you're envisioning for these success measures.
Well, thank you. So, I mean, ultimately, like I was saying previously, what we really look at success is how many kids go into a post-CCR pathway that's in line with their career plan. With the local workforce boards that are going to be hiring career counselors, we're going to start working in the 6th grade, and in 6th grade we're going to do a lot of career exploration. Probably that would carry over into the 7th grade. 8th grade starts becoming more career prep and getting them focused more on one of those, what career you want to go into and which post-CCR pathway that career aligns best with, so that we can ultimately get them onto a post-CCR pathway. I really think that's ultimately what the role of career counseling is about, is to ensure that students pick a post-CCR pathway. But we've also, as a group, have talked about some benchmarks. We don't want to say outcomes yet because we know that the AIB is still looking at outcomes, but we said some benchmarks that we want to consider. One of the benchmarks are the number of students served. We want to see a % increase. I know that we started looking at some data from our school system. We know how many kids are taking advantage of career counseling now. And we want to see an increase in that. So be able to benchmark that and show the increase in that. The other thing is the number of students who have been presented with information on in-demand industry clusters in the area and seeing that percent of increase. Again, looking at how many kids have already been really exposed to the in-demand industries in the local area and be able to benchmark that and show an increase for in that. The other measure that we have discussed or benchmark we have discussed is the number of students who continue on a post-CCR pathway, again, in line with their career development plan. And then this is one that's not really about career counseling, but just as a local workforce board and working with our CTE partners, the number of students who participate in a registered apprenticeship program. So those are the benchmarks that we're looking at right now until the AIB comes out with hard outcomes. But those, for us to get started, that's where we're looking at.
Robin, do you want to complicate the registered apprenticeship with an or?
And when Robin said what she said, I'm sure we would be amenable to saying or industry credential. And I like what Robin was saying that, based on the jurisdiction that may be, because just the difficulty of doing registered apprenticeship in rural areas with the number of businesses, the transportation, everything like that, I think that makes sense. So I know that we would be interested, we would be willing to do that based on the LEA.
Thank you. I can just say from a rural standpoint, and it's not unique to Blueprint, it was this way for PTech and other initiatives. Things well designed and thoughtfully planned that work well in the Baltimore-Washington corridor, often at the fringes in different regions, different economies, different, they just don't work in the same way. So it's helpful to have a little bit of flexibility built in to acknowledge different LEAs, different regions, different economies.
I want to also just express that for those LEAs, such as Prince George's, with a large population of students who may not be able to complete an apprenticeship and are seeking an industry credential, it's good to have both. But I also, I had the pleasure of meeting with a principal this week of a school who has a large population of students who may not be able to complete an apprenticeship. And this particular principal shared with me that when she met with her students prior to them sitting for their exam for their industry credential, the students were just so struck with fear because for a lot of our students, just I guess sitting for an exam or putting themselves out there in a certain way to be seen is a huge I'm at a loss for the right word, but it's really a big deal for them. And so I think we also have to think about that. Although, we're talking about our legislation, but we really have to make sure we understand what the students are actually having to go through to try to fulfill either one of these. And that could be, a reason that that 45% looks different for every LEA that we've already discussed, but also, maybe students are picking one thing versus another thing. I don't know as it relates to their pathway, but I just want to make sure that we are sensitive when we're talking about our constituents, our students, all of the additional things that they have to go through just to participate in our programming.
I'm not sure I'm capturing what you're saying, Olivia. And Rachel and I are tag teaming these as we do. So can you make sure that this, or even put words on the page or in my mouth here to make sure that, are you talking about accommodating those students who can't complete one of the three or enter one of the three?
Let me see. If we have a student, let's say, who's undocumented, and they're living in a household with a family who wants to stay under the radar. So by trying to complete an industry credential, that process sometimes can be daunting for students and families, and they can potentially receive resistance from their family in order to participate. And I'm just bringing this up because I had a conversation with someone who was just expressing how their student felt. And it was something that I think I hadn't thought about in that way. And so I just want to make sure that, we also, as we're talking about all this, we have to think about, what this may mean and what extra supports, communication. There's a lot of additional work that we have to do so that all of our students feel comfortable participating in any of the program that's afforded to them. Is that better?
Yeah. No, I totally, and to piggyback off of that, so we have, I guess you bring up a good point. There's lots of factors that could impact students choosing any of these pathways, whether it's dual enrollment, CTE, apprenticeship, whatever it may be. And we did discuss the undocumented student issue at our CTE meeting not too long ago. And it was kind of one of those things that was noted, but like not sure how to address that right now. The other piece to it too, and I know that it's talked multiple times, is it mentioned in the implementation plan and through other conversations that in order to increase apprenticeship, a lot of LEAs are going to have to be flexible with their model, their schedule. And you can be as flexible as you want, but at the end of the day, for a student to commit not just to an apprenticeship, but some of our industry credentials, like for example, a CNA or cosmetology, auto tech, those all require a number of hours, so often impacts a student's schedule. Sometimes students are having to leave their campus to go to a cross campus, cross county, a career and tech center. So we're making students make very big commitments as young as 15 or 16 years old, even beyond the apprenticeship model. But when they pick any of these very specific industry credentials, that's a time commitment for them. So the undocumented, that's a huge issue. And there's definitely a lot of concerns there that we need to be sensitive to. But at the end of the day, we're also offering asking a 15-year-old to commit to a major like scheduling change. And that might not seem like a big deal to an adult, but to a 15 or 16-year-old who might not be able to eat lunch with their friends, or could affect the way if they play sports or a job outside of school or just other things. They might have to get their brother or sister on the bus, but in order to go to their clinical, they have to commit. There's lots of little things that are really important to an individual student and could actually decide whether they sign up for a program, even if we're very flexible. And I think that also needs to be recognized, that there's a commitment on the student's part to do these things, and we're asking them to make a commitment at a young age, which is great if we're doing career counseling right, because if we're doing career counseling right, they already know when they're getting into that. They know in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I want to be a CNA, so I know I have to do these things, and I'm going to be attending the hospital, and I'm going to be expected. Like, we're setting them up for that commitment and what they need to do and what that's going to feel like. And when we're putting them out there and those experiences, they're prepared. So I think that's why these things go together, of making sure students are very well educated on the expectations, what the experience is going to be like. And the other side of this too is, I think industry credential, I don't want it to be viewed as, oh, it's the easier way out for some LEAs who have barriers. I think really what needs to happen is this, hopefully, and from what I've read, this is what's going to happen. The CTE committee is going to review everything that Maryland already offers. And we're going to really take a deep dive, and hopefully we have a part of that too, and have experts in all these careers really look at what are we already offering and what is the industry credential, and is it really setting students up for success? because again, I'll use CNA as an example. There's already an apprenticeship model that's kind of built into it. It's not the Maryland Youth Apprenticeship. However, students, there's oversight by Maryland and the Board of Nursing. There's levels of certification. It is all very much so. There's oversight that it is a valuable industry credential. Like we know that, and students are going out into the workforce while getting their education. That's probably a program that doesn't really need as much adjusting. There could certainly be some changes made, but that might not be like the priority. We might need to look at some of our other pathways and say, okay, they leave this with this industry credential, but is it really helpful? And the only ones who can answer that are experts. And that's where the Workforce Development Board comes in and is providing some look at this list of what MSC already offers. Is it an industry credential that is going to give just as much value of that on the job experience, or is that embedded within this program? Because if it is, it could solve a lot of the problems. It might be better for some of these pathways that they have a little bit of a hybrid, like they go and do an internship, but then they're also getting instruction in their classroom based off the curriculum they're using. This is an industry credential that they leave with that is equivalent, or it's just as good as if they were to go into this apprenticeship, or maybe not. And I think that's where we have to really, like, I'm hoping that the CTE committee, that's what they're going to be doing, is looking at what we already have and making some priorities of, can we provide students options in this pathway? So for students who maybe couldn't go and do an apprenticeship or an industry credential, do some have flexibility? Do some of them not? And here's why not. So because the thing is with some of these pathways, we need to really make sure, like, they could leave with an industry credential, but if they haven't been given the skills that they need along the way and they just pass a test, depending on what it is, like, are they truly prepared when they leave? So I know that the CTE committee also has said that some of the next phases with this is that they're looking into standard setting, like across the board for programs, of having like common benchmarks across the state for programs. And I think those are all great things. Like, those are things to make sure that if you left a program in Maryland and the CTE program, it doesn't matter if you were in Talbot, Washington, Baltimore County, I know that you met these standards because there's some alignment there. So, yeah, I think that the next phase of this is hopefully getting all of that input from experts in all these different areas, because they're the only people that could really give the CTE committee certainly has a lot of diversity in backgrounds, but I'm hoping that that's a step, because I know they have to evaluate this. There's going to be standards, skills reviews, and all of those types of things. And then the expert review teams, like, there's lots of plans to move forward of what does really rigorous and valuable instruction in CTE look like in Maryland. But I think all these things have to go together. Like, the career counselors need to be aware. They all need to work together to making sure that we're preparing kids way in advance so that they know what they're committing to.
I really like that, and I agree. And the only piece that I feel like we need to add, and I don't know if it's the same in every district, but I will say for Prince George's, is the earlier we involve the parents, the better. And so I know that career counseling is for our students, as it's written in the legislation. And I think in the middle school is a great time that there can also be the parent engagement piece, because a lot of our students, they're committing, but it's their parents. It's a family decision, not just the student decision, because
Right.
it's going to impact everyone. And I think, Robin, you stated about, it could impact a job, or it could impact, picking up their little brother or sister from school. Like, there's a lot of implications for this. And so really understanding that it's a student decision, but it's a family decision. For a lot of our families.
Yeah, Olivia, you're 100% correct. I know that Anne Arundel Public Schools have made it very clear that they want this career counseling to reach out to the parents and get them involved and have them be aware of it and participate in it. And we agree to that. I mean, we think that it is the right thing. We think you're 100% correct. It's the family. Sometimes it's the parents. The kids know what they want to do. The kids are excited about what they want to do, but their parents tell them something different. I had this whole conversation with my aunt with her grandson. She said, no, you got to go to college. You got to go to college. He wanted to do HVAC. So, it's very important to inform the parent. Also, from a local workforce board's selfish standpoint, we want the parents engaged because some of the parents could use our services. So we can help the whole household in this matter. So you definitely have to have the whole family involved in this career counseling piece. So yes.
That's a good point. Absolutely.
And just to echo an earlier point, an HVAC certification is not always incompatible with the student dual enrolling, going to college,
Right.
and stacking that credential into an associate degree later.
Yes.
And that's an education component that not every parent, has. It's part of it.
Most of the trades, they get enough credits that they could earn associate's degree by the time they go through their programs.
Can I ask how this actual career counseling would look like? Like, is this a different individual than the guidance counselor that's already in the schools that now we're bringing in new people?
Yes.
And
So Peter,
Okay.
The whole concept of this career counseling is the fact that guidance counselors have already been asked to do so many things. And everything from, helping kids with picking classes to keeping kids safe to dealing with mental illnesses and other factors. So the whole concept is that you would have these individuals, and some are going to be hired by the LEAs, some are going to be hired by the local workforce boards, but they're all going to work in conjunction. And it's to have these individuals that will help kids, students, to be able to really pick a career that they want to go into. Where most of the local workforce boards are, like I said, I had a conversation. We had our bi-weekly meeting, and I purposely got an update to report out to you all where everyone is. So most of the local workforce boards have gotten through the MOU the MOU process. Rachel, we really need to get these guidance out because several of them have already gone through the signature process. So we really need to get this guidance out as soon as possible in case there's something that they need to change. But most of them have gotten to that part, and now they're working on the curriculum and looking at how do you bring this into the classrooms. I had a very good meeting earlier this week with Anna Rundle that some of the leadership there, we actually start diving into how are we going to infuse this career counseling into, we started with the core classes. What is it going to look like? How are we going to be able to bring in guest speakers? How are we going to be able to do videos? How are we going to be able to bring in activities, do field trips that align with what they're being taught in the classroom already and connecting it to careers? You're in a math class. Let's bring someone in who's in a math occupation to talk about how math relates to them. In English, just writing, instead of, right now, English focuses on a lot of, literature and things like this, but let's talk about how you write reports and things like that in different careers. So really infusing what they're already, the career counseling into what they're already learning.
I love that. Two things. First, I think you're absolutely right about bringing in people. I think actually maybe the most valuable thing that I've gotten out of college so far is just going to speaker events and dinners with people from all sorts of different careers, so I can get exposure to fields that I've never heard about. So I think that would be incredibly helpful to bring into high schools. My broader concern, and maybe this is too late if things are already being signed, but I think that helping students determine what career might be best for them requires knowing a student pretty thoroughly, to really understand that. And I know that one of the issues that, at least back in Howard County, the discussion was always that the ratios between guidance counselors to students was too high, that that they're running out. There's too many students to deal with. You can't get to know them as well. If we're bringing in, say, just a couple of these career counselors, and maybe they meet once for just the specialized purpose of choosing a career, rather than maybe nestling that into the broader guidance and student services consortium, right? Where students are meeting with counselors over years and getting to know them, even if it's just through picking classes and stuff like that. I wonder how effective that might end up being. I know I'm not an expert, but that's my curiosity.
So it's going to be more than one. I mean, for example, in Anne Arundel County, we're looking at bringing on about 25 career counselors, so that they will be in the middle schools. And it's not going to be just infusing this into the classroom is not the only time. We're going to be able to set up other activities to do that. We're looking at doing this over the summer, having more industry, boot camps and things like that to really get to know those kids. I mean, one of the things that the law says, individualized career counseling. So we are going to have to get to know them as an individual. One of the first things that we're talking about doing assessments, like Gallup Strength Finders and different, so that, we do get to know the kids, and they're going to have to put together a career plan. So it's going to talk about what are your strengths and interests and aptitudes and abilities and what careers align to. And we know that that's going to change as they get more awareness of different careers and get more exposure to different careers. So your whole point is correct. The bottom line, and I believe this is the reason why they added these career counselors, because the guidance counselors could not do it at that level. So bringing these additional staff into the school system, no matter if they're going to be hired by the local workforce board or the LEA, they're all going to be doing that same thing and really focusing on getting kids to understand what careers they may want to go into, and then aligning that to the post-CCR pathway that helps them best to be successful in that career.
That makes sense. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Peter, I just want to draw your attention to a link that Rachel dropped in the chat that links to career counseling guidelines, and it kind of outlines some of the expectations for the MOUs in a way that helps provide more context too. So it's a helpful document for anybody. And I also want to draw all of our collective attention to the time. We should think about, we've made progress on specific benchmark recommendations. One of the other pieces that Mike DiGiacomo suggested we talk about is, let's say an LEA is falling short, the expert review team or what have you finds they're falling short on any of these specific success measures. Then what's the follow-up step? That's not a conversation we're going to have in the next 7 minutes, but it suggests to me we should probably schedule another meeting, maybe 2 or 3 weeks out, depending on what our schedules allow. And maybe between now and then, we can each have read some of those more of those plans and come ready to talk about the rest of our agenda. And I also have some constituent feedback to share too. So what do we think?
I definitely support that. Maybe this is a big topic for another meeting, that we focus on that part for another meeting.
I'd agree.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an easy 2 to 3 weeks from now, we reconvene to sharpen anything that we've written today about specifics, but also to return to what are the follow-up steps. And the guidance from the thinking of CTE at this point is not punitive guidance, but or follow-up, but follow-up that pushes past the status quo. In other words, incremental progress. It's kind of already embedded in the benchmarks that are suggested here. Percentage increase over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
The idea, the worldview is we're going from A to B, and it isn't going to happen in 1 or even 2 years necessarily. But how do we keep it moving? And that's what they're looking for guidance on.
So one suggestion I will make around this, if LEAs want to make sure that their CTE programs align with what business interests are or needs are, your local workforce board, that's their purpose. They're made up of 51% businesses. I mean, if people want to be, what I'm going to suggest to Anne Arundel is that we be proactive, and we take all the CTE programs that they're running And we have our local workforce board look at them and say, yeah, if a kid went through, graduated from Anne Arundel County Public Schools and have completed and passed this CTE program, I would consider hiring them. Or if they got this industry certification, I would consider hiring them. Or, this industry certification plus an internship, I would consider hiring them. So, I mean, this is one way, instead of waiting for the CTE committee to come out and tell you that your program may or may not align, looking at your local workforce boards, their businesses, they know that. They're the ones, I mean, ultimately, that's the end customers, their businesses.
Yep. It's how we operate. Robin?
And we actually, we had our, I don't know when that was, Dave, the Workforce Development Board where CTE directors were invited. I guess it was last month. And we kind of touched on that a little bit. And I think I completely agree. I think the only problem is that right now CTE is kind of it falls in this really weird area of not knowing who to, I guess, report to in a sense, because right now we're under MSCE, what we have to follow on in that program of study. Like we're bound to that program of study at the moment. So everyone's kind of afraid to make any shifts. But what I think we could do is ask for feedback and what are things that we can change that wouldn't still take us out of alignment with MSCE's program of study, right? That would be good changes to make that would align, but still following that program of study that wouldn't take us out of any compliance with the credentials MSCE sees as being a CTE completer. And then while we have that information, probably what would be a smart thing to do is if all the workforce development boards started to gather that information for each program, because we all have the same, if it's a Maryland program and not a locally developed program, we all have the same program of study for those. Getting that input across the state, and that's something that we could actually provide the CTE committee without, like you said, without waiting for them and being ahead of the game with that. It would provide us immediate feedback of things that we could change now, while also handing that information off to the CTE committee of, look, we have done outreach with all the workforce development boards, and they have reviewed the programs these programs that exist so far. And this is some of the feedback. I mean, that could very easily be arranged. You know what I mean? It could be a form. It could be something where we organize it by different programs, where then workforce development boards could, if we had it organized by the career cluster, that could be sent out in some sort of survey or form with some feedback, that it's just then compiling all that information and sending that out. Because I think at the end, no matter what the CTE committee, however they decide to do that, I mean, I'm assuming you're right, they'd be going through the workforce development board anyway. And the CTE directors already have that relationship. We have access to the programs of study. We know the ones that are probably a more priority for maybe needing change, because that's going to be a lot of information to put out, because there's a lot of programs and a lot of there's over 500 technical assessments that we have right now. But maybe we could start prioritizing them of which ones we think probably need to be reviewed, or which ones aren't aligning right now for what we see with Blueprint.
Right.
We have a lot of programs where we know, like right off the bat, like this is definitely going to align. It's already a state credential. But then we have some that fall in these weird areas where they don't really get an industry credential. They get maybe a college board, like taking an exam. Where does that fall? Where we need some more input. So that's something that, maybe that needs to be some sort of, I don't know who organizes that. Like if that's something that comes from us, is that something that comes from MSC, but figuring out a way of like housing that information so we're not doing extra work, because I feel like it's something that whatever survey it is or however it's collected, it should be the same type of review for all the workforce development boards. And it'd be really interesting to see the input from across the state.
Excuse me, I need to jump. You want to schedule or take the first steps towards scheduling in maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody have a preference between those two timelines?
I will be out of town in 2 weeks. that Wednesday on, so I will only be in for half that week. So I would prefer the following week if possible.
The 22nd.
Can you give some dates, Robin? Sorry.
Yeah, I will be out of town that Wednesday the 17th through the 19th, so I wouldn't be available. But the following week I would be. Week of the
22nd.
22nd. Mhm.
The 23rd right now is open for me. Anytime, if that's a good day for everyone else.
Any time between 11 and 2 or 11 and 3.
Yeah, I'm the same as Dave.
Or
If
the
we could do
Tuesday the-
11, if we could do 11, that might work for me. I know I'm booked in the afternoon on the 23rd. The 24th is bad for me. And then I can make things happen on the 25th.
for me, or at least, yeah, for me on the AIB side, I could do Tuesday, the 23rd at 11 with a fairly hard stop at 12.
Mhm.
Let's
That'd be
sign it
good
up
for
if
me.
Peter can
That's-
make it. And
That works.
Okay, that's perfect.
our agenda will be to finish this agenda.
Yes.
It is, and there's so many other things that we need to layer in as well. I think to Peter's point, like, how are all of the folks collaborating as we're talking about the career counseling? How does the career counselor collaborate with the professional school counselor? And then we also have the teachers that are working with these individualized plans for the students who aren't CCR ready. And so these students are still getting career counseling as well. And so how does all of this kind of tie together?
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Olivia,
much.
could I add to that also that we just also keep on the radar our students with special needs and our English language
Mhm.
learners and, career counselors interfacing with those students, and how the rest of our school staff would be connecting to ensure that we're meeting needs.
Perfect.
Great
We've
meeting.
just drafted
everybody.
our agenda.
Perfect.
I think we did.
I'll send a calendar invite in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you guys. It seems that we are 3 minutes over. So if there are no other additions, I suggest we move forward with closing the meeting.
Sounds good, Olivia. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
A second.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you all.
See you.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.